Welcome to Nantucket Community Television, Channel 18. I'm Charlie Walters. On April 6, 2019, Nantucket has its annual town election. And on the ballot, there are 6 men and women running for 2 spots on the select board. And I'm delighted to have one of them here with me in the studio today, Toias Glidden.
Glad to be here, Charles. Thank you so much for having me.
Glad to have you in. You've been on the Board of Selectmen. Now you want to get back on. Tell us why that is.
So, I had a great experience getting on my first time. I was the youngest ever elected.
How long ago was that, just for those who don't know?
That was 6 years ago when I first got elected to the board. So I've been off for 3 years. And I'm running for the same reasons I ran last time, I had a great experience. I felt like I really contributed to the community. And I took 3 years off the board, took my time off, did a lot more reading, got engaged more in the community. Had some, personal things I had to deal with my father, passing away. And so I'm now I think this is such an awesome community and want to keep giving back in any way I can and bring my expertise in a number of different subjects to the table.
Well, I know one thing you care a lot about is transportation, especially in the downtown area. Mm-hmm. Where is that right now, and where would you like it to go?
So when I was on the board, I was a big advocate for connecting up our bike paths. Hopefully in the next year, we'll be connecting in Wind Street that I advocated for when I was on the Board of Selectmen.
The Wind Street runs between the Matica Road and
Hummock Pond.
Hummock Pond Road.
Yep. We're going to be connecting in the in-town piece from, kind of the Rotary down Washington Street this fiscal year at town meeting. So please vote on that, everybody who's out there. It's important to show up at town meeting for that. When we look at transportation as a whole, we have to realize as a growing population, we're constantly having more and more vehicles here. And I think a carrot and a stick approach is the way to go. We got to incentivize people to get out of their cars. I bike pretty much year round. I love it. It's great. It's free exercise, keeps me happy, smiling. That's hard for a lot of people. I understand that. But, we just built a nice little bus shelter over across the Landmark House for people to stay warm and take the bus. So if the folks from the Landmark House can do it, anybody can do it.
Now, let's get down to the exact path not the path, but the exact route these connected paths are going to take. And what's the specific idea behind doing that?
Well, so there's a couple different pieces. There's kind of the Chicken Hill piece that needs to be connected over. That's something I pushed for a lot when I was on the board, and I want to see get done when I get back on the board. Another piece is Sparks Ave, kind of connecting that 5 corners and the big tree by the school and connecting, the next little rotary there. That needs to be widened. It's used often by people. And that's a real connecting piece that's used quite often and just isn't properly used. So I want to see that improved because a lot of people are using the Mid-Island and biking around the Mid-Island and walking on the Mid-Island. And I think it's important that we give some services there. But beyond that, I really want to focus on, the town pieces kind of moving forward along Washington Street. And then lastly, we've talked for years about a bike path in Tom Nevers, and I want to make it happen. Let's do it. It's dangerous going in and out of Tom Nevers Road, and we need a bike path there. It's the next big piece.
So connecting all the current bike paths, thus creating new bike paths, and then connecting them, in shorthand, that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, yep.
Let's shift to cars for a second. For years, the area down around where Strait Wharf meets what I still call the A&P parking lot, that's always chaos. I mean, even in the middle of the winter, it can be chaos. What can be done about that? Yeah,
so I think, again, it's a carrot and a stick approach. Let's incentivize people to get out of their cars and, give them other ways of getting in and out of town. So ultimately, I think we've done a really good job with the buses we have. I think in regards to Washington Street, the problem you look at as far as transportation goes around the country, around the world, is the more cars you have, the more traffic you have. If you build more parking, it doesn't do any good because the roads are already so constricted on Nantucket. So I don't see trying to improve one bit of traffic flow one area improves it in another. Because fundamentally, we don't have enough space on the roads to cover the traffic we have. So we have to look for alternatives. And I think ultimately for people's health, our lifestyle, when it comes to emissions from cars, flowing out into the harbor, we got to look at alternatives. And I think, that's something I'll continue to push. And it's about, lifestyle. We live in a small place that's easy to get around. Let's try to facilitate that. The shift towards, other ways of transportation is more about culture than it is about policy. So whatever I can do to, on my own in biking here this afternoon and biking around, I think that's what we kind of need from our selectmen, is to show that leadership in a way forward for our community that gets everybody to live a bit more of a healthy lifestyle and is a lot more fun. I started riding an electric bike this summer, and it was just so much fun. It was so much fun. Like one day I passed 154 cars, and I was just going 15 miles an hour, just
That's
passing
hard to do
along.
in a car.
It's hard to do in a car. So it's like, I look at that and I go, I didn't even notice the traffic this summer. I had a little rack on the back, and it was awesome. And so I think just showing people that there's other ways to do things, especially folks who are here in the summer. You come here, from Connecticut, New York, wherever, you don't really want to be in a car. If you can give people a safe way to get where they're going, give them a bike, give them a little electric motor, bam, they'd love that. So I think facilitating what people want is the most important thing. And I think people want to get out and be active, and we're definitely seeing that in this day and age.
How do you feel about a downtown parking garage?
I'm not supportive of it at all. What I am supportive of is moving forward with the electric company. I think it's been kind of that property hasn't been developed because there's this back and forth, well, should there be a parking garage or not? I think we can't just hold up on things because we can't all come to the perfect agreement on every single little piece. Let's find what we agree on when it comes to the old electric facility there. And let's make something work as far as that whole location being a lot of what everybody wants to see. And the parking garage can sit on the side.
Do you mean that literally or figuratively?
No, you just design out a space and you say, if there's a parking garage and people want to vote for it or pay for it or whatever mechanism that is, this will go here, and then we move forward developing the rest.
Should the voters decide on the garage, or should the select board, who of course are elected by the voters, but whose decision should that be?
I think it should come to the selectmen ultimately, but if the voters want to put in their cent as well, I'm more than happy to listen to them.
Let's shift tracks to affordable housing, the problem that just won't go away.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've spent a huge amount of time looking at this issue. I've been a big advocate for a number of initiatives on Nantucket over the years, ever since I was on the Board of Selectmen last. And at this year's town meeting, I put forward an article for $20 million. It's been adjusted to $20 million, supported unanimously by the current Board of Selectmen, to purchase mixed-site units and convert summer homes into year-round, SHI-eligible affordable housing. So when it comes to affordable housing in general, we have a lot of entities, the town included, that look at our community and say, we are going to continue to be destroyed by 40Bs, and we need to get to 40 more units to meet the SHI list. And then we can talk about an overall program that we'd like to see, whether it's in zoning or adjusting market structure to allow the further creation of affordable housing. But right now, when we're constantly under the threat of 40B, we're constantly not controlling our own destiny. And I think one of the things that I bring most to my candidacy running is I have a huge expertise in affordable housing. I sat on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for 2 years. I've attended numerous meetings off island with DHCD. I've been a big advocate of the tiny house article when that was put forward, the tertiary article. I think we need to do more when it comes to that and facilitating a smaller living for young people. That's not about density. We can't continue to build the island forever. We talk about traffic and then we talk about housing. We got to be able to control our destiny and control growth.
Just in the last few days, the idea of the town purchasing the Nantucket Inn has been taken off the table, at least for the time being. Would you have supported that?
I don't feel like we really had a grasp of what that project would look like, frankly. And so I'm not, I was interested in looking into it, but I put forward a proposal that I thought really answered a lot of the concerns of the community, which is that we don't want dense housing on Nantucket. It's not Nantucket. Density is inappropriate in the mid-island. Density is inappropriate downtown. You know, we have a lot of units together downtown. That's how we built. That makes sense. But having this large amounts of density off Surfside Road, you know, off of Old South Road isn't appropriate. And so I think the clear message I hear from the community is we want decent housing that's respectful of people, that's respectful of neighborhoods, and puts neighborhoods first and puts communities together. And that to me is a mixed site approach.
If you try to avoid, I don't mean you personally, but if you try to avoid density, the alternative sometimes is sprawl. So how do you navigate that narrow channel, if you will?
Yeah. So I think, you know, fundamentally, you know, we have a trend going on. So from 2010 to 2015, we built 500 year-round homes and 1,500 summer homes. Then from 2013 to 2015, we built 35 year-round homes, lost 160 year-round homes, and built 435 year-round homes, or seasonal homes. And so you can see the trend is going the wrong way. Every year, more and more housing units of the ratio is being converted to summer residences or investment residences. And so to deal with that, there's kind of two problems. One, housing shouldn't be an investment. It should be about people living in it and driving people to come here, to stay here because they want to be part of this amazing community that we live in, not because they're just looking to make some money off of it. So I think that's an important piece. You know, we have to make the cost of reselling a unit, flipping a unit more expensive because that drives the market. Secondarily, we need to look at, in regards to density or sprawl, purchase existing units. They're already there.
Such as the Nantucket Inn.
Such as the Nantucket Inn, but I think the Nantucket Inn is a different conversation.
Yeah,
for now,
well,
it's off the table.
It's
frankly.
off the table. Yeah. Climate change. It used to be that the flooding down around Easy Street and other spots was a rare occurrence. Now you can guarantee it's going to happen several times a winter. How does Nantucket deal with that?
Yeah, so I look at this. This is probably of all the crises facing the community. This is one of the elements that I know the most about of all the folks running for selectmen. So, you know, with Zach Dussault, he started a solar company 7 years ago, ActSmart Solar. I partnered with him to kind of further that business, or the island's, you know, biggest solar installer. We opened what we call the Shanty, used to be the Scallop Shanty, right downtown. That's an educational space that started in September. So we're going to be ramping up for next summer to educate people while they're getting an ice cream cone. They can learn more about climate change, what they can do, how they can take action. From that space, I've really seen, you know, my building gets flooded. So I've been working with, you know, the Nantucket Preservation Trust to tell that story about how we're losing our historic character due to sea level rise. But, you know, lastly, when we look at the climate crisis, and this is something I was a big advocate for dealing with and taking local responsibility when I was on the Board of Selectmen last, but I never had 3 votes. I was always, Toias, he's that, young, ambitious kid. He's got all those great ideas, but, here we are 6 years later, and this is a big topic for everyone. And so I look at it and go, man, I was focusing on the right things, and I just got to keep fighting for my community and make sure that we maintain viability as the sea continues to rise. So when we look at climate change, we got to start off with a couple basic things. One, we're going to see 26 inches of sea level rise by 2100. That's coming from NASA. Two, we are, as a community, when we look at wealth on our community, the biggest thing we purchase from the mainland is energy. The town, the municipality spends $2 million a year on electricity and $500,000 on fuel. That's $2.5 million a year that we ship off island. When you look in aggregate as our whole community, we are constantly purchasing fuel for our vehicles, fuel for heating our homes, and electricity for heating and cooling our homes. So fundamentally, the biggest cost and the extraction of wealth from our community comes from purchasing energy from off-island. So I think fundamentally, when we look at our community and our history and our fact that we used to export energy, that we were the first oil exporting community, arguably in the world, exporting whale oil to the UK to light the streets of London in the 1800s. We need to look at that heritage, understand it, respect it, and say, let's push for 100% renewable energy. We have the expertise, we have the capital, we have the mental resources from all the folks who come here. Let's push for 100% renewable energy. Hawaii voted 2045, 100% renewable across transportation, heating and cooling, and electricity. California, the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., Massachusetts is looking at it right now this year. Let's not ask for leadership from the federal government, from the state. Let's take ownership of our future, of the issue of climate change directly here.
Well, how do we accomplish that on Nantucket?
So I think there's a couple different ways to do that. One is, as we transition to 100% renewables, which we're already seeing that trend happening, we're going to need to increase our electrical capacity. So a lot of the community has heard a lot of conversation about a third cable and the need for a third cable.
With National Grid.
With National Grid. And so I've spoken recently within the last couple of weeks with an executive at National Grid, and they're talking about the timeline for needing a third cable to be much sooner than we originally anticipated. And I think the Energy Office, Lauren Sinatra, has done a great job supporting clean energy initiatives in our community, and she has not gotten the support she needs over the years. So that's something I want to do when I'm on the board, is support her and make sure that her office, which is the one office that saves the town money, that actually puts coffers back into the town, gets the support it needs. There's no other town department that really fundamentally does that. So I want to give her the support she needs. Secondly, when we're talking about that capacity factor, and as we transition to 100% renewables, we're going to need a lot more electricity, because that's the better way of doing things. So we're already seeing a lot of people converting to electric heat pumps for heating and cooling. So we need more electricity to run those heat pumps. As we convert to electric vehicles that you'll see more and more of over the next 10, 15 years, we're going to need more electricity to charge them. So fundamentally, one of the things I am going to advocate for is, as these offshore wind farms are being built south of the island, I want to bring a cable from one of those farms to Nantucket. And the reason why I think that's so important is because when we talk to National Grid about what the cost would be for a third cable, and I spoke with them in detail 2 years ago, the estimates were about $125 million to bring a cable from Cape Cod to Nantucket. If we were to bring a cable from offshore wind farm to Nantucket, I was told it would be about $50 million to bring it to Nantucket and also give us some added resiliency. So you're talking about a $75 million savings from bringing a cable from the mainland to Nantucket.
What do you say to those people who say, wait a minute, what about the wildlife out there in the ocean?
You know, I hear that talked about a lot, and I say, you know, there's some concerns there, okay? But I think ultimately they're being addressed in an appropriate manner. I think the developers who are looking at developing offshore wind have done an excellent job in educating folks the best they can. We can look at the Block Island wind farm and see kind of the impacts it's had. Right now there's a video online, you can type in like Block Island fishing, and there's huge mussel beds growing off the turbines, you know, the foundations. And so it's become a fishing spot off of Block Island for people to go and fish. Even this summer, there was a buoy out south of the islands, and people to monitor the wind and the currents before the projects get built. And people kept coming to me with stories of, oh, I went out fishing there and there was tons of mahi-mahi, like the shade and just having objects out there. So one, I think it's going to be great for fishing. Two, I think the technology has come so far that we've really had a really good understanding. We've got to learn from the mistakes that have happened in Europe to get this technology installed correctly. And then lastly, I look at people who say, oh, I'm concerned about the environment. I go, well, do you think the Europeans are concerned about the environment? You know, they've got 4,000 turbines off the coast of Europe. Do you think the Danes aren't concerned about the environment? You know, the Danes, you know, they're biking around. You know, they put the environment very high on their totem pole. And to say that, you know, Europeans don't care about the environment I think is a really flawed argument. And I think we need to understand that, there is going to be a bit of a give and take, but I think ultimately what's most important for the environment is not seeing 2 degrees of temperature rise. And we have intrinsically as Nantucketers, we had a part to play in bringing on the age of fossil fuels, and we have an opportunity to be supportive of that change. And that takes leadership, and that's something I want to bring to the Board of Selectmen if I get elected.
As I said at the top, you're one of 6 people running for 2 spots on the select board.
Mm-hmm.
There never seems to be a lack of candidates for select board.
Mm-hmm.
The other positions that are up for grabs, if you will, it's a different story. SHAB, for example, Shellfish and Harbor Advisory Board, there are more openings than there are candidates. A lot of the committees that get appointed every spring, same problem. There are positions that stay open. How would you encourage people to get involved in town government?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question, Charlie. So one thing I think is really key is really listening to your committees. A lot of people go out there and they put in a lot of work, and they don't get the respect they need for the work they put in. And I think having kind of communication. So I've gone to a lot of little committee meetings while I was on the Board of Selectmen, and I have since being off the Selectmen. And I think one of the great things that the Board of Selectmen has done recently is give a strategic plan to give guidance to folks in the community. And the strategic plan has helped guide the transportation plan that Mike Burns has been working on. It's helped guide the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and their initiatives. And I think it has to come from that top, that leadership about what a priority is for the community. And that if you go out and you find solutions to problems and you come together as a committee and you form consensus, that the board, when you come to the Board of Selectmen, you're going to be heard and listened to. And that's something I really want to bring to folks who might be interested in something, show them a way of how the committees can work well together with the Board of Selectmen, with the whole community, with the town administration to bring about the changes we need in our community.
Is there a way of streamlining the committee system set up in this town so that people don't think, oh, I don't have time to do it. I can't possibly find the time to do it?
Yeah, so, I think there's been a lot of that going on, or at least been talked about through, kind of the government study committee, looking at where the overlap is with pieces. I think there's definitely, some redundancy as far as what certain committees do, that we could kind of bring things together to be less dispersed. And doing that takes some sensitivity, because a lot of folks feel like they've really put in a lot of effort in a committee and it's become their little fiefdom, for example. And you have to be able to work with people and show respect to the changes they've made, to say, hey, maybe we could kind of combine these 2 groups together to bring about some of the changes we need in our community.
Let's talk some more about forms of government. The select board right now is a part-time position,
Mm-hmm.
and the pay is,
Garbage, yeah.
I wouldn't say garbage, but it's pretty low.
It's very low.
With a growing island, do you foresee a time when Nantucket should have a full-time select board?
I think it's definitely, there's this conversation that's gone around in the community. Should we have a representational town meeting?
That's
Should we have
another
a
item. Yeah.
city council, or whatever does that look like? And I have to say, I've talked to a lot of other selectmen in other towns. I've talked to city councilmen in other cities, and one thing I've really seen is that the town of Nantucket and nods off to the fact that our town is run pretty well. If you were to go out and look at towns across Massachusetts, this is one of the better run towns in the state. And
Well, it's also one of the smallest ones too.
it's one of the smaller ones. So looking at that, I think pursuing more of a way of allowing the selectmen to be more full-time, or supporting them in their role, is important. I think some of the other committee members, trying to give them a little support they need. Things like iPads, so you're not constantly printing out documents for meetings. Those things help people. And I think when people get on committees, we should support them in the efforts they're doing. So I think there is, I'd like to see trying to improve the form, the structure of the select board versus shifting to a new form of government, to kind of get into that question a little further.
One last question before we go. Being on an island, there are limits to growth. Build out is not a dream. It's 100 years in the future. It's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's getting closer. What does Nantucket do when every last piece of land is something built on it or has been conserved?
Yeah, so great question. So fundamentally, back to kind of that issue of climate change and holding wealth here and building renewables. Reducing your cost of energy is fundamentally the most important piece in driving any sort of industry. So if you can lower costs through the energy you're using, you can open up a lot more industry. So I'd love to, as a community, talk about municipal broadband so we could get faster internet here on the island to really service a lot of the tech industry. We have a beautiful island. It's quiet in the wintertime. Let's get people here who want to sit in a nice home and work from afar. I've got a friend who used to live in Boston. He now lives up in Vermont, and he commutes to work once a week. And other than that, he works from afar. So I think fostering entrepreneurship, resiliency, farming, manufacturing on island in the funny ways we can, I think is really important.
But where are they all going to live?
Where are they all going to live?
Yeah, if there's no more space to build houses and people still want to come here, that is going to raise prices, theoretically. Prices are already sky high.
Yeah.
And they can't drive to the next town because there is no next town. So
yeah, so I think...
Is there a ceiling on the population?
I think there is a ceiling on the population.
And what happens then?
Of course, there is a ceiling on the population, And I think, fundamentally, when we look out at our community, we say, oh, we're like losing our sense of our community because it is getting so built out. And it was meant to be a rural place. We don't want to turn into the Hamptons. You watch that movie, One Big Home, and it's like, yeah, this rural area, and then all of a sudden it turned into the Hamptons. There's no community there that lives there. And so I think to have a community, you have to set in place market mechanisms that control the growth. And I think I'm the only candidate who's running for selectman, for the select board, who's put in place, policy that we'll talk about at town meeting that addresses the affordable housing crisis at scale.
Tobias Glidden, thanks for coming by today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Charles.
Appreciate hearing what you have to say.
One last thing I'd just like to plug in, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
Is that something that's really close to my heart that I see happening a lot is that we are not dealing with mental health as a community. And so when you talk about committees and getting committees to work well, I see the Contract Review Committee as a great place that we need to be more supportive financially as a town to push forward, making sure we have an ambulance to take people on and off island. We have food assistance, we have rental assistance, all sorts of great programs go through the Contract Review Committee. And I want to make sure when I'm on the board that I'm going to be doubling the funding of the Contract Review Committee to make sure we are dealing with the mental health for people on this island. The healthcare in the state is great. The federal government isn't doing enough. Nantucketers take care of our own, and I'm going to continue to do that if I get back on the board.
Thanks for that last point.
Thank you, Charles. It's always a pleasure seeing you.
Well, good luck with your campaign.
Thank you.
And don't forget to vote in April at town meeting and at the ballot. For Nantucket Community Television, I'm Charlie Walters. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again next time.